Thank you so much for joining me today, Francis Willey. Hello, friends of Pandemic Poets, friends of Pandemic Poems. I am here with Francis A. Willey, artist of Calgary. Francis has a poem in the book, Pandemic Poems, and he is also the artist behind our cover art, which I get many, many compliments on, Francis.
Thanks.
I hear from people, that cover is amazing. Where did that cover image come from? When I submitted it to the publisher thought it was so good that it must be under copyright somewhere and we must not be able to use it for the cover. So it's beautiful. Thank you for contributing it. Could you tell us a bit about this work of art?
Yeah, as an artist, I started off with collage at the same time as I started writing poetry. So this was me coming back to that way of expressing. So it was just in November of last year, before the pandemic, I got overwhelmed with a feeling about death being the sort of like the shepherd or the troubadour of the cosmos. And I thought, death is the shepherd of the cosmos. I have to create this, where death is, ushering these people, which is like a galaxy of stars, like every individual in the world is a separate star, like a glowing soul, almost like a god or a goddess in their own right. So I sat down and just started going through, I collect very, very old books and magazines and such, a collector of antiquities, and then I just kind of pieced together this image, and it came from this wild source, and once I finished it, I was exhausted. I felt, which most of the time when I create art, I feel exuberant joy, or like an accomplishment, or it's like a form of ecstasy, or like an art orgasm in the sense when you create a fine piece of work. But there's something about this one that was puzzling to me. I was like, I felt very like almost collapsed inside from creating this image. And then when you had contacted me, I just felt this would be a good image for the book. It was almost like having a premonition about what was to come. And sort of like I was an instrument to making it. Outside of other art, like art comes from a source, dreams, inspiration for myself. Sometimes I piece it together, the vision, but this came all at once.
Yeah.
So
if I can just reflect on it. Oh, I don't need to hold it. Thanks, Francis. If I can just reflect on it, I feel that the story of the premonition is really powerful here. So before we had any knowledge of the coronavirus pandemic, you had this epiphany about the significance of death in culture. Okay, you started thinking about that. It's a dark thought, but it is something that's very important to our humanity. And it's an important part of the argument against the futurists who want to upload human brains into some machine. Some of us who are humanists would find such an existence much less meaningful than one that goes through the life stages of a human being and ends. And so death is significant and a defining feature of our existence. And so this kind of came upon you a few months before we had a mass death event on the planet. We haven't had something like this where a pathogen kills more than 1 million people in 100 years. So you start thinking about this, and then the image itself, the thing that the people respond to about the book cover image is how the image of a coronavirus, not necessarily this novel coronavirus, but the image of a coronavirus can be seen in your collage. The roundness with the spikes sticking out, and when people see the image on the book, they reminisce about that image that they see on the news of the shape of the coronavirus, and it is astounding to them that this was created before we had any news about the pandemic. And so I just wanted to sort of put that together for those who might view this video. It's a fascinating part of the origin of this piece, and I think the mention of death in the title of the work of art makes it yet more appropriate as a cover image for Pandemic Poems, because this is the main anxiety that motivates our thinking about this. It's how can we prevent more death? How can we protect people? Am I safe? How do I protect myself? How do I protect my neighbors? What's going to happen? All this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a wonderful piece for the book. It's got a great story. I want people to know the story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to share the story. And the emotion, I just remember I felt so deflated and sad after I made it. I felt this weight somewhat lifted from me, but also I felt it was just different than a lot of art pieces I had created.
Emptied out,
yeah,
like you can
out.
feel sometimes when you work really hard on something.
And the scissors, I was just like wildly cutting, and everything was just falling into place. Like just, well, sometimes artists will draw things or whatever, but this all just came wildly.
Yeah. Yeah. Artistic inspiration is like that. You can work at it like a craft, and that works to produce.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, you might have the weirdest day ever, and you stayed up all night, and then you wrote a book.
Exactly.
That happens also.
Mm-hmm.
And these extraordinary epiphanic kind of experiences.
Sort of like artists and writers, it's like floating around in the universe. Like it's floating around, somewhat like the coronavirus in a sense, but you're able to grab and latch onto it, and then you can pull it in, and then if you don't use that idea right away, someone else will get it. Sort of like it becomes available for you. I think that we attract that as writers and artists. Yeah. It's sort of like it's our mission to grasp onto that, and then once we create that piece of written work or that art piece, then that becomes a powerful expression for someone else, because someone will feel this emotion from it, and then it'll inspire them to create something even greater and bring us closer together as a society compassionately.
You contributed a beautiful poem that I will mention continues one of the main themes of your poetic output, which is to zero in on human suffering. I've known you for 25 years,
mm-hmm.
and you have chosen subjects such as the abused, the homeless, and so on and so forth. Often, I would say, in the poetry that I've heard from you, it is a kind of a harrowing, but also, I mean, you have an aesthetics in your poetry of sensitively treating those who society has left behind. And this poem features that also.
Yeah.
So I was reminded of some poems of yours that you shared with me in the 90s, you know. But this subject matter is, it is what is sort of like one of those key things that will get your attention. Right? And so I appreciate it. So you contributed your poem, Returning to the Gardens. I would love it if you'd read it for us, please, Francis.
Sure. Returning to the gardens. You are a mystery to me, like a languishing lover, staying over and over and not letting go of the bed. And all the star shapes immobile. Ovid would write erotics before I was born. Oh, universal COVID. Now I have a desire to live. I am wondering 5 decades after my birth if I will feel more of this life, taste the salt off the sea instead of tears on the TV. A depth in nostalgia and mystery in every moment, in the lack of this laborious breathing on a shipwreck of humanity. Not to die slowly, sufferable society. We are samples on medical slides, observed by the whole world, petrified by a petri dish, indelible marks, an origami red bat hanging off a willow branch, a folded green monkey, a yellow paper giraffe, elongated neck for an isolated family birthday party, children craning through a window frame. In a twist of fate, people attempting to face fears as love takes over likes. An elderly woman passes on her heirloom seeds to a frontline medical worker before she is placed deep into the soil, returning to the gardens.